everything that is put out there means that someone is judging you based on that. I'm going to piece this together and try to figure out who this person is. And it relates directly back to like, is this the person I want to work with? A lot of the stuff in the beginning, when we first started, we realized like, oh, all the bigger companies that are working here, that are getting the jobs that we want, are all in a production company setting. Because a lot of people will fake their way through it. I'm sure we faked the way through a lot of things in the beginning. It's just knowing at the end of the day, can you actually do it? If we just had continued to just keep working as like individuals, I absolutely don't think we should be where we're at now. Welcome back to the Unfold podcast. Today you're joined with Juanjo and myself. Today we're talking about something that's super important. We kind of made up this framework that we think is super important when it comes to understanding your value as a filmmaker, a director, a DP, whatever it is. And without this, you're not going to get as many jobs. You're not going to get as much money. You might not get any jobs if you don't do this properly.
Oh my God.
And imagine, once you figure this out, you'll actually start to understand how the system works a little bit more, how to value yourself as a filmmaker, as well as actually figuring out how to raise your rates, because this actually involves all three of these. It's a trifecta after all. And we'll dive right into it.
Let's talk about optics. Why is this the first pillar of the trifecta?
Optics is super interesting because it's one of the main ones that you can affect all the time. It's how you showcase yourself to the world. It's how you brand yourself. It's how you market yourself. It is the first impressions that you get from other people. And so without this, you kind of just like float around, right? A lot of people just kind of like put everything out there in terms of how they want to be showcased and seen. In the beginning, it's totally fine. I think if you have nothing on your books, and especially for like newer filmmakers, you're just putting stuff out, right? I remember my running videos, my barbershop videos, all these things. Mm-hmm. But everything that is put out there means that someone is judging you based on that. So more or less like their first impression when they go onto your website or your socials is like, I'm going to piece this together and try to figure out who this person is. And it relates directly back to like, is this the person I want to work with? Right. And if you look at two people, person one, they have a sporadic kind of portfolio. They've dabbled on maybe one cool project in every space. And then they're like, okay, what does this person mean to me right now? Or what does this person look like? What they can do well or they can execute well on, versus the other person is like, they only do car commercials. And now they're like 9 car commercials deep. And there's like a variety of the types of car commercials, but at the end of the day, all their stuff is consistent. If you're like a car manufacturer or something and you're looking for someone to work with that's specifically in the car space, are you going to go for the car person, or are you going to go for someone that like has shown skills, but like just there's no consistency across the board, mm-hmm. right? There's no like the optics there is just completely different, and like the optics adds so much value in that sense, because it's like you need to understand that oftentimes the first impression is everything.
Yeah,
and it's like shaping that to the world as well.
Yeah. I think the optics game is definitely the most important, because that's the first game that I learned how to play within this industry. Because before I worked here, I was doing an internship and I worked at a little company called Tier Zero, and I learned a lot of things there. But I think the biggest thing that I learned was how a production company is actually structured. And when me and my friends were, doing our thing, doing our little projects here and there, the very first thing that I implemented was, I don't care how many hats you wear for this project. I don't care what you do. When we make this credits list, everyone is going to get like a designated credit of like, this was the director, this was the DP, this was the producer, blah, 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 blah. Just because like when you have that credit list, it differentiates between like, look at this project that I made versus like, oh, these people are operating at a production company level. So in that sense, do you think there's a direct correlation of optics and like your perceived like level of expertise?
100%. Like that's kind of the whole point of the optics. It's how it kind of perceives you into the world, right? So in the beginning too, when it was just me, Justin, Adrian, and Zach, when we put projects out, there's only 4 of us. Mm-hmm. So it's like, do we understand even the standard of how productions work? Right? It's like, not only is it understanding that, it's do you showcase it? Do you understand how that works? So then we can hire you for that project. Because if it's just 4 people, it's like, as much as you want to put, a credit and like extend a credit and just like Zach. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, that doesn't also look super great in terms of how people like, do you like, why are you guys putting everything? You know mm-hmm. what I mean? Like, do you guys not work with a bigger company? Like a lot of the stuff in the beginning, when we first started, we realized like, oh, all the bigger companies that are working here, that are getting the jobs that we want are all in a production company setting, right? Like, not only does starting a production company make you feel bigger, it also gives you the backing of it in terms of like a separated branding, a different voice that you can create. And ultimately, it just kind of helps you elevate in terms of getting to that next level. Which is why when we think about like when we first started, it was much more difficult to get jobs of any of that caliber because people just weren't looking at us at that level. And it wasn't until we started to realize like, oh, the standard production company world, like they work with like colorists and producers and like sound people that we never even thought about existed. And we're like, why do they have 15 people? We could do this with 4 people. It's like, yeah, you can do it with 4 people, but it's like not the look that you want sometimes, right? It's like we want people to know that you're like capable of doing this work. But at the same time, it's like if you're not working with the best of the best out there, or you're not constantly evolving how your systems work or what your team looks like, then people just kind of put you back into this box. Like it is very much a first impressions like game of how people perceive you, and like that perception is everything, right? There is a perception tax of like if you're not doing things in a very specific way, it could just bite you in the back end to be like, oh, maybe they don't understand, or they're not at that caliber of level that we're trying to work with when it comes to production companies.
Plus, when you got 15 people on the credits list, you can charge for 15 people versus 4.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's always like games on past that. Like that's like a, a financial ends of thing too. But really at the beginning, it's like we knew day one we needed to start a company as like 4, solo filmmakers that were trying to make it into something. If we just had continued to just keep working as like individuals, I absolutely don't think we would be where we're at now, just because we wouldn't get like the credibility, the trustworthiness of like, oh, these guys have done other work and they've showcased it, and you get to just brand and package things differently as well. Because if I was just posting every single thing that like everyone else was posting and I wasn't even part of the list, right? Like that was a big thing too. It's like, how do we still show up in every capacity, whether it's just as an EP or a producer or, a DP within our own company that like allows us to continue spreading that kind of visibility across the board. And so like when it comes to how this values and impacts your work in terms of like finding new work, you have to think about how people are perceiving you from the outside. Even simple things like when I had, photographer in my bio as well, and people were like, oh, you're a photographer. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that people just immediately associate. If I say I'm a photographer, if I say I'm anything, if I say tomorrow I'm a plumber and a director, they're gonna be like, you're a plumber. Yeah. Like, why would they not believe you for what you put there? Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like simple things that you can start to clean up and like actually make tactical changes on, to really just help elevate and put you in a good standard for other people to like actually hire you for future jobs.
Cool. Let's move on to execution, the ability to execute. Why is that the second pillar?
To me, this is like reliability as well. The ability to execute means a lot of things. When someone looks at your page and maybe they've gone past that level and maybe you've started to have a conversation with people as well, are you saying the right things? Are you understanding of how the industry works? Are you understanding of like how you perceive their work and what kind of energy you're kind of showcasing as well? Because people are going to make this quick judgment on what you're saying and versus what you're actually capable of doing. So they might look at your whole portfolio and be like, because, you've actually hit this other pillar, which was, optically things look good, and think of it like a perfect Venn diagram. And then the other one is like the consistency of what it is. So like maybe you do a lot of car jobs, and then also like how you speak and everything in terms of like the optics side of things. When it gets to ability to execute, it's like, you're trying to remove any anxiety or questions from the client side to be like, are these the right guys? Are these the right people to actually do this project? Because again, that's the biggest one. They're potentially going to give you hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to do this. Are you the right choice? Can they trust you? Do you have like a good standard of like how your credits list look, right? Like how do you speak about clients? How do you actually do all these things? All these little things stack up and add to the value of like that kind of like relatability and that trust in like, are you the right person? So all things to say, figuring out exactly where you sit means that like, can you actually, even for yourself too, it's like a confidence thing. Do you feel like you can actually do this project? Because a lot of people will fake their way through it. I'm sure we faked the way through a lot of things in the beginning. It's just knowing at the end of the day, can you actually do it? Right? Like if things come down to it and you need to figure out exactly how to execute and make sure that the client's happy, are you the right person for that? And like it's kind of like a natural gut feeling from both sides, right? Like you need to say the right things. You got to make sure that like they're comfortable, they understand that like you're on their page, like you're on their side, and like you're a team with them. If you don't know how to speak on that level, it makes it very difficult for clients to just trust you and to give you the money that you want to actually do the project.
And how can you get to that level of like people trusting you to be able to do that?
Yeah, you just do more. Like in the beginning, when you don't have a portfolio, your top 5 pieces are probably super sporadic, right? Maybe you have like still one recap from before, like one small business thing, but you're like maybe you have like 1 or 2 specs that like actually start to feel a little bit more high end and like close to what you're trying to aim for as a production company or a director. Um, and then over time, like you do 3 and 4 and 5, and then eventually all those recaps disappear, right? Like what you showcase to the world, back to the optics side, really add to the value of like, oh, I understand who he is now and where he's going. And so like, does a client make that decision there to be like, this is the right person because I know they can execute on this. So it's all these little steps from, especially when you're just starting, like no one expects you to just have like the best thing ever. But that's kind of why you only scale at a certain speed based on your ability to be consistent and your ability to be like reliable across the board. Because like in the beginning, you don't have any jobs, and then you just start ticking them off. And then the faster you can like showcase to everyone, like this is who I am now, and I'm no longer that old person. Like that's when clients trust you a little bit more, and you stop getting the questions of like, oh, do you also do weddings? You know what I mean? It's like you're slowly getting closer to that full trifecta where people know who exactly you are, what type of work you do, and then like how to treat you as well, because that's like a big one.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that then. Consistency, our last pillar. Is that just being able to execute consistently, or is it deeper than that?
Yeah, it's every level of consistency.
Okay.
It's how you speak, it's how you show up, it's your branding, it's your personal branding, it's all these things. When we first started, we were just kind of everywhere, right? It's like 4 individuals that, Zach had do some car stuff. Adrian still was doing a lot of like business stuff. Justin was doing his storytelling. I was just doing whatever. And what starting Tenfold allowed us to do was be much more consistent in our voice and our branding, and kind of just centralizing all the conversations into one specific stream, which is like, we are a production company that's based around, narrative work and documentaries. And just like constantly just dialing in who our audience is, both on like the client side as well as like who we wanted to speak to in terms of our work. And so it kind of like, that's where it started in terms of consistency. But back to my point earlier of even the work that you put out, for myself as a director, it's like, I want to stick more into like the sports world and fashion world, but keep it in this like kind of like darker, more contrasty tone. And like my work typically, there's very specific like, shot selection that I prefer or like or lean on. And even like the style and the pacing, like all these things are very consistent within who I am. And when it comes to becoming a director, and like as any director that's coming up right now, it's like having 5 pieces of work that's consistent, that has your voice, is going to outbeat everything when it comes to, even if you have like 5 random pieces, all at very high quality, but there's no consistency in the voice and like who you are. It makes it very difficult for people to make the right choice, whether you're the right person for them, because you can almost skew generalist when you really should just be doubling down on like the quality, but having a very specific tone of voice.
So if a new director wants to, or a production company wants to stay consistent, should they just be, what is the approach to that? Should they just be doing like a lot of jobs, like getting as many jobs as possible? Or is there a better approach that you recommend?
Yeah, for anyone that's kind of coming up too, and like we've dealt with this a lot, there's like probably 2 paths that are gonna come at you when you start to get a little bit more consistent with like becoming who you're trying to become. Right in the beginning, like me transitioning from like barbershop work into more specifically commercial work, it was a very big jump. And like even cleaning up optically who I was and the work that I was doing, like it took steps and time to do that. And it also takes time for people outside to see you in a different light as well. It's like if you've been doing weddings for 10 years and now you're switching over to commercial work, Like, don't be mad that people are still asking you for wedding work.
Yeah.
Like, it's naturally still, I'm sure for you guys too, like it's naturally still gonna like pop up. Like if you guys are doing like running work and like, you know, kind of more like recap stuff right now,
Yeah.
it's like you're probably still gonna get some of that conversation until you make those like bigger gradual steps to like start eliminating or start like rebranding into a new direction.
Yeah.
Because it takes time to like tell people, you know, who you are.
I still get like inquiries about like production roles that I like don't even do.
Yeah.
And listen, I'll take the money, but it's like that's
Yeah.
not who I am anymore.
It's not who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like it takes time to kind of like switch over the mindset a bit. Something that people fall into the trap of often is like you're making that move and the decision to be better, be bigger. And then you take a lot of the old jobs and then you reshuffle that back into the marketing or like putting it back out there.
So you're like diluting your
You're
effort.
diluting it and you're like doing yourself a disservice because you're just reeling it all back again.
Yeah.
It's like you want to just stick with the direction, and honestly, you're constantly raising that standard if you can, right? It's like the job should be at least at that new level of what you're trying to do. And if it doesn't, like you need to be very conscious about just putting everything out. I think some people think consistency is just putting like everything under the world that they've shot out there.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's actually like what that voice is immediately once that first impression kind of hits. It's like if I go on a website, like based on all the work, can I understand who that person is? And it goes both ways, right? So if you're just like going back and forth, you kind of just need to commit to who it is you're trying to become and what you want to do, and then not go back to the old version. And not to say like just quit on everything. Sometimes you need the money and like there's money jobs, but we also do money jobs. And we also do jobs that no one ever sees. And those are the same thing, right? So like you just want to be very selective as you start to grow, because everything you put out is pretty much everything you say to the world.
That's the optics.
It's the optics.
That's why it's a trifecta.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's not just about like consistency isn't like just put out as much stuff as possible. It's about like
putting out the right stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
The trifecta works for a reason, because like you kind of need to make sure everything is aligned there. And you need to be growing and learning. And so like you're not going to get into this whole agency space unless you're like very locked in on all these three. Because you need to understand how to speak to people, how to speak and communicate to agencies and like that world for them to trust you at this scale. And so this is definitely step one for everyone. If you're just getting into filmmaking and trying to grow into like either production company or like a standalone director, DP, whatever it is, you just want to make sure that like you keep all three of these in mind as you go about life. Because even your personal stuff, it also connects and like showcases in your optics world as well across the board.
Yeah.
So you want to see where you're kind of speaking on every front, you know? Well, thanks again for joining us. That was the value trifecta that we've built over the last few years, working in the industry as we grow and kind of like build this production company, which is tenfold. If you guys like this topic, or if there's any other topics that you want to talk about, just let us know. We would love to actually deep dive into anything that you guys are currently dealing with, because we've pretty much gone through a good bulk of it. So yeah, let us know in the comments below or podcast on YouTube, whatever it is. See you in the next one, everyone. Bye.
Peace.